Good morning, learners. A warm welcome to each and every one of you to the first session of our lessons on international relations. I hope all of you are having a nice time, and recently you have found that there are a lot of issues related to international relations which has been occupying the minds not only of policymakers but of individuals like you and me. In fact, it is right to say that without international relations and discussions about international relations, our life would be indeed empty. Lot of issue areas do come in, and these are so relevant for our lives that you cannot divorce international relations from our everyday activities. Whether it is the price of your food on your table, whether it is the price of your clothes that you are wearing, whether it is the climate that you are enjoying at home and outside in the open areas, or even small things like the policies that individual governments introduce at even the local level. All these are in fact affected by international relations. I can give you a very simple example for that matter. Recently you have found that the prices of oil have gone up dramatically in many of the countries across the world. But in India, the price of oil has remained practically still. Why? The answer is very simple. It is because we are having a preferential agreement with countries like Russia, based on which we get cheap oil, which can indeed be processed at our units which are located across the country. If such favorable practices are not there, then we also would be paying the same kind of prices for our oil products as anywhere else in the world. So international relations, the relations that each country maintains with other countries, are of great significance. And you would have noticed that it is more and more becoming an interlinked world, a world where all relations are getting clubbed together. You cannot have a situation now that you can keep yourselves isolated from the rest of the world. But if you have to understand international relations or geopolitics in general, it is essential that you also need to understand the basic theories which in fact explain to you how a certain phenomenon actually happens. Now, theories are important not only for international relations, but it is important for all sciences and social sciences. And needless to state, in international relations also we have a large number of theories which needs a great deal of explanation. This chapter is all about international theories. We will be covering it in 2 or 3 sessions, and in the meantime we will also be going through certain questions, very critical questions about how these theories affect international relations and indeed our daily lives. So let us begin these sessions, and definitely you have an option of contacting us through our email ID, that is rctrivandrum@igno.ac.in, to clarify any doubt. So let us jump into the theories as such. Basically, if you talk about the theories of international relations, traditionally you had a certain set of theories which we call the classical theories. These were those theories which have been handed over in time, and in Malayalam we call it Paramparagata Maitulla theories. And as opposed to these, there are certain modern theories which started emerging maybe around the later half of 18th century onwards. And these theories are in fact the bedrock of international relations that we talk about today. Classical does not mean that these theories are isolated and have no link to the modern theories. In fact, both these theories are closely intertwined, and you will understand in the next few slides as to why these are so closely linked together. Another classification that you have with regard to the theories is between Western theories and the Oriental theories. Western, as we all know, comprise of theories which have been formulated by experts and theorists who are located in the Western hemisphere. And Eastern or Oriental theories are those theories which were propounded by great philosophers of the Eastern hemisphere, including India, China, and so many other relevant and important nations. So we will also explain in great detail about some of these path-breaking theories. I am sure each and every one of you must have seen this picture. Can you guess who this philosopher is? Can you guess who he is? I am sure that all of you will make the right choice and the right answer. He is none but the greatest of theoreticians who first dealt with the international relations spectrum, that is Thusidydes. He was in fact the first person who scientifically analyzed what international relations is. He is the person whom we consider very much as the father of theories as far as international relations goes. And you also know about his path-breaking work, don't you? That is the history of the Peloponnesian War. Now this book actually explains how a great war of the ancient times actually panned out. This is the Peloponnesian War, and this war was fought between basically two countries, that is Sparta and Athens. Now Sparta was at the head of the Peloponnesian League, and the Delian League was headed by Athens. One of the critical features of theory promulgation by this great author is that his methodology is very sound and fully scientific. It is based on an exposition of facts and facts alone. What do I mean by that? He is not putting anything extra from his end as far as his analysis goes. He is straight away going into the analysis by emphasizing on what happened at the ground level when he is talking about the Peloponnesian War. Now the Peloponnesian War is of great significance because it was fought not only between two countries but also between two groups, something very similar to what happened in the First and Second World War. See, this is why we call the fact that history always repeats itself. The actors may change, the persons whose names are mentioned in those significant events may change, but still the fact remains that history repeats itself in diverse ways. Now, you must all have heard this concept, security dilemma. In Malayalam, we put the term as Suraksha Pradisandhi. Now security dilemma is something very significant, and that is used every day today. What is security dilemma? And this is one of the basic concepts he introduces in this wonderful book, that is the history of the Peloponnesian War. Security dilemma is nothing but a very psychological concept. Now let us take two households. They are having a fight with each other. The first household puts some arms and ammunition for its own safety in its bunker. The second household comes to know about it. He or she who heads the second household will be tempted definitely to take countermeasures and ensure that if the first household attacks him or his household, he will be able to defend himself. So, security dilemma is essentially such a mechanism where the fear that one set of countries or one country becomes stronger militarily induces a response action from the other country in a way that it is trying to prevent the first country from making a preemptive attack on the second. So, here also what happened was that the growing Athenian power instilled fear and apprehension in the Spartan minds. So, the Spartan leaders were proactive in ensuring that Athens did not become so strong as to subjugate them unilaterally, and therefore this actually led to a kind of conflict, a preemptive conflict wherein the efforts were made to subdue Athenian power, which was growing tremendously. Now, Athens had its own peculiarities. It had definitely superior resources, being a better placed country nearer to the ocean, and with tremendous international trade. It had enormous resources which Sparta did not have. Furthermore, one more thing that we should understand here is that Athens was a democracy, whereas Sparta was a dictatorship. Now, dictatorships always have this fear that they will be subjugated by either its own people or by attacks from outside. That's why you see today that countries like North Korea always take preemptive steps to militarily become so strong that no one will attack them, no matter whether their internal conditions are so poor, so disruptive that their people suffer a great deal. And people, the domestic population often is subjugated a great deal in countries which are under dictatorship. Athens had its own superior resources with great naval power, and it sought to wear away the Spartan power through a long drawn war. And the strategy of Sparta in fact resembled more of modern day insurgency. Even today, if you see, insurgency is taken as a state policy by many countries across the world. You see a number of insurgencies panning out everywhere. Even if you see, many countries like Pakistan and China actively promote insurgency as a state policy often, and that is a matter of great concern. And that is why we say that the concepts which are introduced in this particular book haunt us even today in real world international relations. Now, another important aspect that was covered in this book was how democracies deal with other nations. Now, there were two sets of countries I was mentioning right from the beginning. One was led by Sparta and the other one was led by Athens. Now, Athens, as I was mentioning, was a democracy. Sparta, of course, was a theocracy, or at best it can be called a dictatorship. Now, when it came to dealing with other countries, Sparta was very aggressive in dealing with those democracies which did not actually support its war cause against the Athenian system. Whereas Athens in fact took a very lenient view even of those democracies which actually did not help them in their war against Sparta. So, we can see that definitely there is a tendency within democracies to actually see that fellow democracies are not harmed in a big way, whereas as far as dictatorships go, no such consideration will be given whatsoever. The last point I need to make with regard to this beautiful book and the theories propounded therein is that the author mentions that in the case of a war or belligerency, the weaker state should never expect that they would be treated on par with the bigger and stronger states. the smaller and weaker states will always be at a disadvantage. Unless and until a state increases its power to the extent that it can defend itself, there will be no consideration shown by the stronger state. We are seeing this in action, isn't it? The Ukrainian war is just about this only. Ukraine gave up its nuclear arms in the mid 2000s, and as a result of that, it was significantly weaker in comparison to the Russian Federation, which still had nuclear arms, and obviously the Russian Federation also has a huge army which the Ukrainians can never match. Now, when it came to the Ukraine-Russia war now, in spite of all the tacit support that the Western nations are trying to give to Ukraine, no one is putting the boots on the ground. What does that mean? It essentially means that whenever you are in trouble, it is only your military and economic power which will help you sidestep the difficulties that you are going to face. Otherwise, what will happen is that you will definitely be at the receiving end. When it comes to India, no one can actually forget the name of Chanakya or Kautilya. And everyone in India has actually at least heard about the great work Arthashastra. Today we are going to discuss in brief about some of the concepts which have been introduced in Arthashastra by Kautilya. As we all know, Vishnugupta or Chanakya is one of the prominent exponents of political realism in India. And his book Arthashastra directly deals with stagecraft. Stagecraft is what? It essentially tells you how you are going to manage a state. State has different dimensions. Each dimension has to be managed successfully and effectively if your state has to be successfully governed. And with regard to foreign policy, Kautilya clearly states that there is something called the mandala theory, about which we will discuss in some detail shortly. And the state can also be divided into 12 different categories. All states are not the same, isn't it? Each state has a different nature, and each state has its own kind of activities that it promotes, either in favor of other countries or against other countries. So, Kautilya was very deeply involved in this kind of a stagecraft, and he explained very clearly as to how different kinds of strategies need to be adopted with relation to different kinds of states. Now, he states very clearly one important fact, that is, foreign relations are governed by something that is called Prakriti, geography and Bhavin. And in Malayalam, if you want to know the terms for this, Prakriti is Prakriti itself, nature, geography is Bhumi Shastram, and Bhavin is Janasankhya or population. So, these three aspects are very important. If you look at it, the nature and resources of a state determine actually the positioning of that state in the ancient world, even today for that matter. Geography is very important. Where you are located, how you are going to face the difficulties from invasions, all this is in fact decided by the geography of the state. And the population or Bhavin is very important. Do you have a very industrious kind of population? Do you have a hard-working population? Do you have a lethargic population? Do you have a population which is highly nationalistic? All these determine how effectively your state is going to perform against other states. Now, I can give you an example with regard to population. What is the population of, say, Israel? A small country. It is less than 1 crore. But still, with all the difficulties that it faces in the Middle East, belligerent countries across its border, no one is able to touch Israel. Why? It has to do a lot with the population. I am not discounting the support that Israel receives from countries like the US, but the population, the quality of the population also matters a lot. Now Kautilya goes on to explain further. He gives certain concepts. The first concept that he gives is the concept of Ari or enemy. The second one is that of Mitra or friend. There can be a third category, that is Ari Mitra, that is friend of an enemy. Then there is Mitra Mitra, that is friend of friend. Then Ari Mitra Mitra, that is enemy's friend's friend. Then you have Pashnigraha, that is the enemy of at the back. Then Akranta is there, that is the friend at the back. And so many other categories have been given by Kautilya. Now the important thing is not to remember these categories, but how each and every country will deal with its friends and enemies. Now Kautilya very clearly states one thing. There are two kinds of friends. One is the natural friend and the second is the acquired friend. There are certain friends who are very natural to you. Now natural friends are the types of allies who are separated from each other by an enemy and has a long-standing relation with the other country, extending several generations of rulers. Now this is very important. Natural allies are always very dependable. You have seen this in action for several decades and years together, because natural friends never ditch you at times of need. You would have seen the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a natural ally to India because it had an enemy in between, the US. And what was fantastic was that even after the Soviet Union declined, the new dispensation in Russia, that is the Russian Federation, even today has the same kind of relation with India as the earlier Soviet Union had. That is because of the natural alliance that these two countries have. Then there is another kind of relation, that is acquired friends. A ruler who was at the time of need of protection taken as a friend is more need based and therefore transient in nature. Now this is a very dangerous kind of relation that you can have. Now I am not saying that perfectly my example would be should be quoted anywhere, but look at the case of Bangladesh. At time of need, when the Pakistani army was creating a lot of havoc in Bangladesh or the erstwhile East Pakistan, it was India which took Bangladesh under its protection, and it took Bangladesh under its protection or the East Pakistan geography into its protection and helped it create a new stable country which we today know as Bangladesh. But today see what the actual positioning is. Today Bangladesh has, at least for the short run, turned itself into a hostile country as far as India is concerned. So there is lot of truth in stating what Kautilya so eloquently stated, that an acquired friend is not as dependable as a natural ally. If you take the case of Bangladesh into consideration, you will clearly understand this case. Bangladesh is clearly an acquired friend of India, and today when certain political dispensations changed in Bangladesh, when Sheikh Hasina was ousted from power, the next ruler, that is Muhammad Yunus, did not consider it important that the traditional relations, positive relation between India and Bangladesh be maintained. So I feel this is an apt example in today's condition that actually acquired friendships can be short-lived, whereas permanent or natural allies are always the best to rely upon. Now there can be other dispensations as well. Now power and national interest, these depend on three important aspects. One is national interest as such. Now national interest is securing the state against military and non-military threats. Now what are military threats? Military threats are very obvious. The army runs into your country, you are being bombed from somewhere, you are being attacked from somewhere using arms and ammunition. These are all military threats. But there are non-military threats as well. Suppose a country pushes in lots and lots of refugees into a country, then your resources will be under strain. So it is a kind of non-military threat that comes in. Your natural resources, you all know that natural resources are today a shared kind of resource. So if natural resources are blocked by one country, for example, a river flowing from one country to another country is blocked by the first country, then it is definitely a case where your national interest will be affected, and that is a kind of non-military threat. So there are several kinds of military threat as well as non-military threat, and we can discuss all that in the later sessions. Then securing national interest is very important. For securing national interest, you need, according to Kautilya, a strong army. That is, we need not have any explanation about that because it is a self-evident fact. However, he also says that for securing your national interest, you also need to have a very strong network of spies. And that is also a significant fact. Today, if you see, whichever country we call a strong country definitely has a strong network of spies. Earlier, they were called spies. Now we call them secret agents or secret services. Mossad is a very clear example of a case in view, because much of the national interest of Israel is in fact secured by Mossad. Similarly, we have other cases also. In the case of India, you have the research and analysis wing, RAW, which is very important. Similarly, as far as the earlier Soviet Union was concerned, the KGB was a clear example of a very strong network of secret agents. Similarly, in the case of US, you have the CIA, which works 24 hours to secure the national interest. Therefore, if you look at it, what Kautilya stated was extremely true. These two aspects are very significant as far as your national interest is concerned. Now, maybe because of the nature of events and aspects in his times, Kautilya also emphasized on something called mantra shakti. That is, whenever your country is in trouble, you can always rely on prayers and mantras. And some of these mantras, according to him, brought strength to your country. Kautilya also explains that the importance of treasury or finances. Today, finances are very important as it was in Kautilya's time. A strong finance, a strong treasury can definitely mean that your country can buy the modern equipments, it can invest hugely in research and development, and it can also be a prosperous country as far as your citizens is concerned. And the more prosperous your citizens are, the lesser the problem they will have against your regime. So definitely the strong treasury will lead to a strong army as well, and that army will secure your borders. So friends, today we have discussed two important thinkers of the ancient world. One is Thusidydes and the second one is Kautilya. I am sure all of you have enjoyed this session. We will deal with other theorists and other thinkers one by one in the latter sessions, and I am sure you will all join me for the latter sessions as well. So once we complete one unit, then we will go into the self-assessment questions also, and I am hopeful that I will be able to present some very interesting questions to ponder about and think about and to elicit your thoughts on the same. So thank you one and all for joining this session. I hope to meet you all in the next session. Thank you.